ideally you have essentially, one set of code where desktop, large tablet like an iPad Pro, smaller tablet, iPad mini, small phone, and it works well across all those devices.
Sounds like a dream for the end users.
Yes. Yeah.
So what exactly? Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about progressive web apps, something that you might have been afraid of, but after this gentle introduction from Ray Camden, you are going to be all over them. And he's going to be speaking at Into the Box about this topic, and very excited to have him. If you're not sure what a progressive web app is, we'll go into that, but it seems to be reliable, fast, engaging, connectivity independent, it's responsive, all kinds of good things. We'll go into the details of what it is and what technologies you might use to make it appear in your web app. So, and if you don't know, Ray is the senior developer advocate for Auth0 Extend, and he works on Extend and serverless customization and the web in general. And he talks at all kinds of conferences as well as Into the Box. So welcome, Ray.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Always a delight. So what exactly is a web app, a progressive web app from a high level?
From a high level. So it is basically a set of expectations, certain functionality. I like to think of it like we used to think of Web 2.0. Web 2.0 was a big marketing term, 4 or 5 years ago. And there were certain expectations about what a Web 2.0 app was. It used Ajax, and pretty much that was it, I think. So in my opinion, I tend to think of progressive web apps as a bit like that. There are certain expectations about features that you should include, but you don't necessarily need to do everything that's under that umbrella. The end result being is essentially a much better web experience.
A better web experience, both from the desktop and the tablet and mobile.
Yeah, so I think the focus is on mobile, and that's pretty much where everybody is, but it's definitely not just mobile. The improvements that you would make would hopefully make the experience better for every single person hitting your website.
And how is it different from a mobile app, which is natively coded on a mobile device?
Yeah. So one thing I don't like to get into is, mobile versus native. To me, it's all about what's the appropriate use case for an application. Should this be native or should this be web-based? And I think because the web or web browsers were kind of sucky on mobile for a while, people defaulted to building native apps. That's why, you go to a conference a lot of times and they say, hey, install our native application, and you have it for 3 days and you forget about it until you find it, like a year later to uninstall it. So because you couldn't do so much on the web, people would build native. And I think what you're seeing now is that the web is capable of a heck of a lot more. And it's not that I would say, don't build native because native is horrible or it's a lot of work, whatever. I would say don't build native when it's not appropriate for what you're actually trying to do.
So if someone was trying to decide that, what would be the criteria? Why would you do a progressive web app versus going down that native route?
Well, I think the web has definitely some benefits in terms of how easy it is to get to. You don't have to install anything. A link, which has been around since Web 1.0 days, is all you need to actually get to it and have it running. So just the ease of use, I think, is a great benefit in terms of what you need. In terms of why I would not use the web or why I would definitely need to go native, if I was building a game, certainly you could do simple games on the web, but anything complex, I would definitely look for native. Outside of that, the web really works well for a heck of a lot of use cases, especially on the Android side. iOS is definitely lagging a bit behind. In my talk, I'll talk about what iOS is doing on the progressive front, and they're actually making moves like right now. Unfortunately, they're making kind of bad moves. Yeah, that's what I'll say about iOS.
And also, it's cross-device compatible, so it can work on Android, it can work on iOS.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big win there is, writing something once and, knowing that it'll work on desktop, it'll work on mobile. You do have to think about Android versus iOS. Some of the features that are included in that PWA umbrella of expectations are definitely not supported in iOS right now. The good thing is that, and it's in the name, progressive. You build your application so that if those features don't exist, nothing breaks. So I can go to a progressive web app on a iOS phone, and I could still use it. I could still, like for example, for a conference site, I could still look at the schedule. That still works fine. Maybe I don't have things like offline support.
So it's gracefully falls back to whatever feature set is on the device.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds somewhat similar to a responsive web app. How is a progressive web app different from a responsive web app?
So a progressive web app should be responsive in terms of how it renders on a mobile device. Responsive, and I'm going to dumb it down really, really simple, essentially means that when I look at your site in different form factors, it responds nicely. So I'm not looking at a desktop site on a mobile screen where all the UI widgets are real small and near impossible to hit. I have something that essentially kind of reshapes itself to work well on that form factor. Ideally, you have essentially one set of code where desktop, large tablet like an iPad Pro, smaller tablet, iPad mini, small phone, and it works well across all those devices.
Sounds like a dream for the end users.
Yes. Yeah.
So what exactly are the criteria for something to be a progressive web app?
So you should attend my sessions so you can see them all, but I'll talk about a couple of them. Responsive is definitely one of them. Offline support is really kind of the big one. Being engageable, and by that it means having a way to bring the users back where it's appropriate. So for a mail client, for example, letting you know, hey, you have new mail via notifications, for example, that's part of what you can support with a progressive web app. So it's essentially multiple things in that umbrella. The thing that I talk about in my session is that you don't have to do all of them at once. If you do one thing to make your website better, to make it approaching the progressive web app ideal, then you've done a great thing. And so I try to kind of break it down into, here are the steps, here's what you could do, and definitely feel free to take one at a time.
So you mentioned email there. Is Gmail a progressive web app, I'm imagining? Or?
Yeah, I swear I remember seeing a tweet from about 2 weeks ago where they have one. Obviously, I mean, they've had a web version that's mobile friendly for a long time now, but they also have their app. So I don't know if Google is planning on, killing the native app and saying just do PWA. Who knows what they're planning. But yeah, I don't really have a good answer for what the status of their web client is.
What are some famous examples of websites we'd recognize that do this?
I am drawing a total blank on that, and
we'll come back later and fill it in the show notes so that
yeah, that actually I remember when I gave this presentation last time, that was something I meant to include on one of my slides and I hadn't done it yet. There's a couple of famous examples. I'm drawing a blank of them right now.
Yeah, no worries. We'll put it in so people can find it on the show notes of the TerraTech site. Okay. So I think we covered why someone would care. Are there any other reasons why you should care about progressive web apps if you're a web developer?
Well, it's all about a better experience, and I mean anything that you could do to make your site better for users keeps them coming back, makes your site more popular, and I mean you hopefully build a site for people to use. So anything that improves that is a good thing.
Right. So you've got people using it more and they come back more because you've got some of that engagement going on. And also they don't have that frustration that when this, their network signals out that the app's died, they can still interact, but maybe not to the same full extent. So if they were using email, they could look at their email, maybe they can compose a reply, but it isn't going to get sent until, they reconnect.
Yeah, so one of the biggest features people talk about is offline support because that's pretty easy to show in a presentation. There's also a feature called background sync where you can basically say, I have a bunch of crap that I made while I was offline, and I could tell the browser, I want you to sync this. And the browser actually handles knowing, hey, now's a good time to sync some data. And I literally just worry about writing the function of, what do I need to get? Oh, here's a list of stuff I store locally. I'll get the first 10, and here's my API endpoint, and I'll run it. But the whole scheduling aspect, the browser takes care of, which is really powerful. And a lot of the progressive sessions I went to never mentioned that feature. Wow. There's a book that I recommend that was like the aha moment for me learning about progressive web apps that goes into detail about that. Also, push notifications is another feature that I never see mentioned. And I want to go back to, you're talking about the benefits. There's actually a website, PWAstats.com, and it's all like factoids that are like perfect for your manager. So if you attend my session and you figure out, okay, it's a week of dev time to actually add some of this stuff in, you can go to that site and you could give them a factoid, like site so-and-so had 30% increase in engagement after making these changes.
That sounds a very useful thing to have. So that background sync sounds exactly what Google Docs has done for a long time. Is that a correct understanding of that feature in progressive web apps? Or?
Yeah, I don't know if they're actually using that particular spec because it is a specification in terms of a service worker, which is part of what I cover in my talk. I don't know if they're using that.
Yeah, they may have coded their own flavor to achieve the same thing, but now you don't have to do that hard work because it comes to you through what the browser does for you.
Android only, unfortunately, but again, I mean, if you say, hey, I can do this the nice way when you're on Android, you could do that. I could also build a manual backup for iOS.
So you've decided you're going to do this. What are the preferred ways of building a progressive web app?
I don't know if there's a preferred way of doing it. For all the different aspects, for example, the responsive part, there's been libraries for years on that. You could just use Bootstrap, for example. In terms of offline support, there's multiple libraries to make it easy. And the actual code for simple caching is not that hard. But you can find libraries already that will do a lot of that work for you.
So you don't have to spend months recoding your app to get it to do this. Is a week a reasonable guess, or is it?
I would say it depends on what you have and how complex your site is. If we're talking about like a conference website, which is typically just a couple of pages, the schedule, about the conference, contact information, and stuff like that, then you could definitely do it really quick.
What kind of? It sounds like you've done this a few times. Is that right, or you've helped people recode a web app to be progressive? Or?
Well, like for my own applications, I've PWA'd it a couple of times to get experience at doing it.
So was it, if you had to describe how complex a process is something you only need a Jedi master doing, or is it something that a regular developer can do?
You definitely don't need to be like a advanced JavaScript person. It's a bit complex, but it's not like scary complex. I would say take it slow, understand your dev tools, for example, know how to debug. And again, these are all things I cover in the talk. Be aware of those tools, know how to test, and take it slow. And I think anybody could do it.
Is it realistic if someone's come to your talk, they could go home the next week and get going on this? And
yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. So I went into learning about progressive web apps because I've been hearing about it for over a year or so, and it seemed like a huge big deal. And when you break it down and when you realize that you could do it in parts, it's definitely feels a lot more achievable.
So you can progressively code your progressive web app, is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about jumping into progressive web apps?
Attend my session. Give me feedback. Let me know what you think. And yeah, that's it.
Now, I know you were into the box last year. What are you looking forward to at this year's event?
The mariachi band, hopefully again.
I'm pretty sure that will be there.
Well, that was my first time seeing one, actually, and it was really cool.
Anything else you liked about last year's event? Or?
Yeah, the sessions were good. I know I saw some command box stuff that I thought was pretty cool. And as you know, I've said I don't do a lot of ColdFusion anymore, but the command box is literally the best thing I've seen for CF in a long time. So I'll definitely, if there's any sessions on that, I'll definitely try to attend them.
There's a whole day workshop, I believe.
I won't be there for the workshop. I think I get in that night.
Well, I think there is a command box session.
Cool.
And I want to say there's some new features coming out for command box because I interviewed Brad Wood, who's the developer evangelist and one of the lead developers on it. And,
cool.
I'm pretty sure there's something new, exciting coming out. So cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, Ray.
And thank you for having me.